Today on Excellent Living, resolving conflict in a healthy way. Relationship expert, Dr. Johnny Parker.
The way we deal with conflict, it can either deepen and make the relationship stronger, or it can be destructive and damaging, constructive or destructive.
Welcome to the weekly program Excellent Living with Cheryl Martin. Conflict is a fact of life and can spell the end of a friendship or marriage. But there is a way to work through conflict successfully and keep relationships intact. Our resident marriage and family counselor, Dr. Johnny Parker, joins Cheryl today to provide practical tools for resolving conflict in a healthy way. Johnny is the author of the books Turn the Page and Renovating Your Marriage Room by Room. Let's listen as Cheryl gets the conversation started.
Johnny, I don't know of any relationship, whether it's parent-child, employer-employee, friend, or husband and wife, that can escape conflict or a simple misunderstanding.
Cheryl, I couldn't agree with you more. Conflict is inevitable. Conflict is normal. Matter of fact, there's a quote by a mentor friend of mine named Patrick Morley. He says this: "People rubbing against each other every day are bound to create some friction. But love is the glue that can hold relationships together and the oil that keeps us from rubbing each other the wrong way."
Interesting, Johnny. You're saying that conflict is inevitable and normal, but some people, I'm sure, believe that the sign of a healthy relationship is minimal conflict. Is that a correct assumption?
No, Cheryl. The absence of conflict does not necessarily mean that you have a healthy relationship. Not at all.
So since you say conflict is normal and healthy, then apparently how we manage conflict must be crucial.
Absolutely, Cheryl. Conflict is a way of life. It is the response to conflict that matters most. For example, your ability to manage and learn from conflict will either deepen or divide your relationships. Let me say that one more time. Your ability to manage and learn from conflict will either deepen or divide your relationships. The way we deal with conflict, it can either deepen and make the relationship stronger, or it can be destructive and damaging, constructive or destructive.
Well, I'm glad we're doing this show today because I'm sure all of us want conflict to be constructive. Are there any examples in the Bible, Johnny, about handling conflict and the proper way to do so?
Sure, Cheryl. As we think about Matthew 18, for example, verses 15 through 17, this is what Jesus says about dealing with conflict. He says, "If your brother sins against you or your sister, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he should hear you, you gained your brother." Again, or your sister. "But if he will not hear, take with you one or two more, that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may be established. And if he refuses to hear the church, let him be to you like a heathen and a tax collector." And so Jesus is making it very clear that you're going to have conflict. And if you feel offended by someone in a relationship, that the first thing we ought to do is go to that person. What we have a lot of times is we kind of become cowards around this. Instead of going to in love and speaking to someone the truth in love, it's easier for us to go to someone else and talk about and dog out the other person, as opposed to having the courage and say, "Hey, you may not be aware, but I felt uncomfortable." And just love, it says in 1 Corinthians 13, believes all things. It believes the best of one another. So Jesus is making it clear that we need to have the courage to carefront one another when there's conflict.
Johnny, it's interesting that you're bringing this up because I heard another well-known minister say that in his opinion, Christians especially do not follow this rule in terms of going first, as you said, to the offending party or the party who has offended you alone.
Right, alone.
Because a lot of times, if, let's say, I feel as if you have offended me, if I come directly to you as opposed to getting on the phone, we can work it out.
Right. Exactly.
But if I start calling other people, let's say, for example, and say, Johnny offended me or he said this, then I could actually cause other people to change their opinion, their high opinion of you.
Exactly.
And then I can go to you and find out I totally misread you.
Exactly.
We've cleared it up, but how many people will go back to all the people that they complained about to say, "Oh, look, it's really not like that with Johnny."
Right. Exactly. And that's exactly what happens. We have given other people, fed them something negative about someone that they may not even know, or they may know in a superficial way, but now people have digested that. They have believed that report, and we don't always go back and clarify that that's not the deal at all. But Romans 12:18 also says this about conflict. if it is possible, as much as depends on you, live at peace with all men. So that's saying that, there are going to be times when I may want peace, but you may not want peace. And you may want war and drama. And so I have to do what's right and honoring before the Lord. And I got to trust God to work out things for you. But I am to do my part for peace. I cannot make you want peace.
Johnny, I want you to put a lot of this in practical terms because you believe that most people have a set reaction to conflict. Explain that, please.
Yeah. I think of it in terms of animals, Cheryl, that there are different categories known by the name for an animal. For example, there's 4 animals that I want to expound upon: the lion, the ostrich, the dolphin, and the porcupine. Let's take one animal at a time. First, there is the lion. And in dealing with conflict, the lion tends to be aggressive. The lion is the king of the jungle. The lion roars. And so the lion, their motto is, let's get ready to rumble. All right? They are into argue and debate. And energize. Oh, yeah. Let's get it on. And they want to conquer. And so their thing is being aggressive. Let's argue. Let's debate. Let's get it out there. And many times the lion will get it out, but they leave carnage. They leave dead bodies, in their pathway as they go through. But many times they'll get it out. They're not known for stuffing their feelings. Okay? And keep in mind, as we go through these styles, these animals, we're not saying that one person fits nice and neatly into a particular box or category. It's true that we can have a little bit of all these, but we may have a tendency, a proclivity to lean more towards one than the other. Just let's keep that in mind. So that's the lion. And then what do we know about the second animal, the ostrich? Well, we know about the ostrich. The ostrich is famous for burying its head in the sand, in the dirt. And so they are avoiding when there's conflict. Let's avoid it. And see, it's interesting when you're in a relationship with an ostrich and something's bothering them, Cheryl, one of their favorite words to say when you ask them, is everything okay? Guess what the ostrich says, Cheryl?
What?
They say, everything's fine. And if you say, you sure nothing's bothering you? Nothing is bothering me. The deal is this: when the ostrich says nothing is bothering them, don't believe it. Nothing does not mean nothing.
So what can you do if a person has sort of closed the door and said, nothing is bothering me?
But you see it in terms of passive-aggressive behavior. The ostrich is famous for pressing your buttons when you're not looking. They commit to guerrilla warfare, okay? And so there's withdrawal, but there's passive-aggressive behavior. And their motto is, I'm out of here, but there's guerrilla warfare. Because what happens, verbally, things are coming at you, and you're wondering, where is this coming from? They said nothing's wrong, but you hear them walking, and if you're married to one, they can be walking, their feet are hitting the floor in the house, and things are being slammed, and they keep saying that nothing's wrong. But you know behaviorally that something is bothering them. Now, to deal with the ostrich, though, is dangerous because the ostrich, again, they tend to stuff. The lion tends to blow it up and blow off steam. The ostrich tends to stuff. But the deal is that they become sick because they become depressed. Ostriches are more prone to depression because they will keep their emotions bottled up and this anger bottled up, and they become depressed because they've stuffed all this stuff inside and they have a real fear to confront. But what happens to the ostrich too, they'll stuff, and they'll stuff till they blow. And you're wondering like, wow, where did all this stuff come out? And they spew and they get all this stuff out. So that's a real dangerous one, is the avoiding is with the ostrich. But then there's the dolphin. The dolphin, their motto is, can't we all just get along? They tend to be accommodating. They tend to acquiesce. They tend to not be sometimes honest about things that are going on. Now, in some situations, we can acquiesce. I mean, if people are deciding in a group, where do you want to go for lunch? That's not a big deal, okay? But there are some things that I ought not acquiesce. And I need to say, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking. And there are going to be times when we can have conflict and we're not going to see it the same way. But can I still honor you as I speak the truth in love to you? So the dolphin tends to be more accommodating and less on the side of having the courage to talk about things, very similar to the ostrich. Well, then there's the fourth style, Cheryl, and this is the style that I think that we really want to embrace and run to, and that is the porcupine. The porcupine. Now, it's interesting. I've never seen it. I pay to see it, but porcupines make love. I think they do it very carefully in making love because porcupines have quills. And with their quills and all, I can only imagine that they must prick each other and stick each other, but somehow porcupines find a way to make it work. And so what are we saying? Porcupines know how to speak the truth in love. Okay? They have their idiosyncrasies. They may prick each other in a relationship. You have two people and they have strong personalities. Or one has a strong personality, another one is not so strong. But it's the ability to be able to speak the truth in love. So for example, going back to the lion for a second, the lion really needs to learn how to not be brutal when they're dealing with conflict. They need to temper it and learn gentleness. That's the growth place for the lion. How can I speak the truth in love? How can I be gentle as I'm speaking the truth? They tend to not offer a whole lot of sugar in their lemonade. The ostrich and the dolphin, on the other hand, they need the courage to speak up. That's the growth thing for the ostrich and for the dolphin. They need the courage to say, I feel upset. I have been, in many ways, at times in my marriage, I've been more like the dolphin and more like the ostrich, where I would stuff things and then I would be ready to blow in the early days of our marriage. Because what would happen if I allowed those feelings to percolate within me, I would easily start to go down resentment road towards my wife. And so God had to really help me deal with and acknowledge what I was feeling and to be able to put words around what I was feeling and to be able to have the courage to speak up about my feelings.
A question comes to mind as we're talking about this, Johnny. In your years of counseling, have you found that to be a porcupine, that's more of a learned style, or are there people who are naturally porcupines? Because it seems like being a lion, an ostrich, and a dolphin can come naturally.
Yeah, I think it does come naturally. I think it's part of it's ingrained in our flesh. You know, I think we talked about the flesh before, FLESH, following long established selfish habits is how we understand the flesh here. So I do believe that in relationships, as you said, especially in marriage or singles or parenting, love is not enough. Love is foundational. Love is key. But we need to learn the skills. And I believe with porcupine, it's learning the skills. And so I believe that you're right, that we have to learn the skills to be able to understand and be aware of what I'm feeling and then be able to say it and offer it in a way and speak it in a way that I call it gentle communication. Speak it in a way that you can hear. Not just talking at you, but speaking in a way that you can hear what we're both saying here and hearing each other. So, yeah, it is a skill to learn how to be a porcupine.
That was relationship coach Dr. Johnny Parker talking about the 4 distinct ways people manage conflict. You're listening to the weekly broadcast, Excellent Living with Cheryl Martin. To learn about this program and available resources, just log on to excellentliving.org. That's excellentliving.org. Once a month, Johnny joins Cheryl to give practical insights for building healthy relationships in a God-honoring way. Johnny has more than 20 years' experience as a marriage and family counselor. Today, their topic is resolving conflict in a healthy way. Let's return to the conversation.
Johnny, what is the best way to address conflict?
Well, Cheryl, there are several questions that I think are critical to ask. I think of it as critical conversations that we need to ask as it relates to conflict. One of the first ones, which may seem pretty obvious, but it's an important one to acknowledge. I had to do this just a week ago with someone who works with me. I raised the question, am I in conflict? Okay, am I in conflict?
Now, are you talking about with that other person, or are you feeling internally what appears to be conflict?
Both, that I was in conflict with this other person, but just even be able to acknowledge and give myself permission to acknowledge that I am in conflict. And saying it out loud that this person could hear it and I could hear it, that, we are in conflict. Okay? And again, that sounds like a small thing, but just to bring that to the surface of the conversation, I think is very, very important thing. That am I in conflict? Yes, I am. Okay. And then the second question, if the answer is yes, then with whom am I in conflict? Okay. Whom am I in conflict with? This could be in a marriage. This could be parenting, on the job. But who exactly am I in conflict with? Another question, what are the consequences? This is an important one. What are the consequences if I don't engage in conflict? Again, in my own life, the consequences would be if I did not approach it, then what I felt percolating inside of me would easily turn to resentment towards whoever I was in conflict with. And I was like the ostrich. I would act out passive aggressively because the ostrich, again, I could identify with that style because that's the one I struggled with. The ostrich assumes that the other person knows what they've done, and I shouldn't have to tell you what you've done, what you're guilty of, or how you've wronged me. And the other person has no clue. So you're making judgments about this person. And so you're getting angrier and angrier. So the consequences for me, depression and resentment. I would start to resent, and I would be tempted to want to get others on my bandwagon to see it this way I see it towards this other person. And then how important is this issue to me? There are some things that just are not that important, but there's some things in terms of my value or belief that is very, very important. How important is this issue to me? Is this a deal breaker? Let's take a dating couple, for example. How important is this issue to me?
If he hits you.
Bingo, yeah. I mean, conflict, you know about conflict, yeah. And so how important is this issue to me? Hopefully an issue like that would be extremely important and you wouldn't take it lightly. What do I want to see happen in terms of the conflict? What do I want to see happen? I find, Cheryl, in relationships, people oftentimes know what they don't like, but they don't always know what they do want. They don't always know what they want. They know what they don't like. And so being able to give alternatives when you say, you know what, it really bothers me when you come late to meetings, or it really bothers me when you speak to me in that tone of voice. I really would appreciate if something's bothering you, that you would first vent to God and tell God about it first before you come in. Give people alternatives of what you want from them. Another question, what do I hear the other person saying? What is it that I'm hearing you say? That helps me get out of me and look at this from a selfish perspective. Because let's face it, when we're in conflict, it's easy for us to want to win and want you to hear what I'm saying. And I'm not always hearing what you're saying. What does the other person want from me? What is it that you want from me as it relates to our conflict? So anyway, I think these are questions that are important questions to ask when we are in a relationship of any kind. I think these questions can apply to almost any relationship context.
Now, Johnny, I think these questions are great. What can a person do before conflict to make sure that when there is conflict, they remember to pull out these questions? Because I think that when you're in the heat of the moment,
right,
you're not thinking rationally. And if someone has offended you, or if your blood pressure is going up, it doesn't say, let me think rational here.
Right.
And think of those questions. Where's that show? Where's that show where Johnny Parker talked about
those questions?
So how can a person begin to change their mindset so they're able to put this into practice?
Well, one of the things I think is I feel strongly that we have to be very aware of our own unique conflict style. I really do. And even in any relationship, and let's talk, because we talk and our focus is on marriage and singles, it's so important in any kind of up close, intimate relationship, friendship, that we have those kinds of discussions about how are we going to deal with conflict. I gave a talk even with businesses, the idea of trust in a startup, in a business, with a group of women just recently. And I said, you are going to be starting a business together. That is very much like a marriage. You have to have the conversation, the critical conversation. How will we deal with conflict? It is inevitable, as we said. So I think it starts there, Cheryl. But I think we can even look at some specific steps, get more specific, that can help us process these questions as well.
For example,
I think one of the things is being willing to give the person the benefit of the doubt. It's easy for us to jump to conclusions when we are in conflict. You did that. You did that on purpose. When we have to get out of our vocabulary two words, always and never. You always, you never. Okay? And so it's important to be willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. That is precisely what 1 Corinthians 13:7 means when it says, love believes all things.
Another version says, love thinks the best.
Love thinks the best. There you go.
And I'm telling you, I think that really requires a major mindset, because I think the human mind, our sinful nature, we tend to think the worst. And that's the scripture that the Lord constantly brings to my mind.
Absolutely.
Is instead of thinking immediately it's like the jugular, you're always, they're out to get me or this
Exactly.
or that. Rather than the best.
Yeah, exactly. You're aware I'm dealing with a situation where someone has written a book very similar to my book. And at first I felt, oh my gosh, this is terrible. And after I backed off it for a couple of days, to be willing to give the benefit of the doubt and say, I do not, and I choose not to believe that they deliberately did this on purpose, knowing that I wrote my book. I'm willing to give this group the benefit of the doubt and not assume the worst. We're processing it all and we're trying to, understand, but, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. I'm choosing to believe the best. So God wants us to have that mindset. And then being willing to vent vertically is another thing. We can be honest with God and tell God on folks, okay? We can be very honest with God and say, God, this is what's going on in my heart. This is what I'm feeling. I don't care for this person. Give me a willingness to address this. So we can vent vertically to God, and let's do that. Let's not vent horizontally on and spew on other people. Let's vent first to God, pour out our hearts there. Another thing that can help us is praying for the other person that we're in conflict with. That helps our hearts from going down bitterness boulevard and resentment road. Pray for the other person. Notice, Cheryl, these things that we're talking about, these are not things that come natural. This is supernatural. This is Holy Spirit induced. Yeah, this is Christ-like. And then another thing is attacking the problem, not the person. The problem is the issue, whatever the problem was, okay, if it's the book, in my case. Attack the problem and not the person. Attacking the problem, not the person's character. Proverbs 12:18 tells us that we ought to choose our words carefully, that there is one who speaks like the piercings of a sword, but the tongue of the wise promotes health. So we want to choose our words carefully. We want to focus on phrases like, I felt uncomfortable, as opposed to you. I mean, how does that make you feel, Cheryl? If I say, Cheryl, you always, or you get defensive, as opposed to me saying, I felt uncomfortable, I felt disrespected, I felt uneasy. If I'm going to be heard, that creates the environment for two people to hear each other. And then another step in resolving conflict is being willing, here's a tough one, own your own stuff, okay? First, as Jesus says, be willing to look at the log in your own eye. What's my stuff? What do I need to own? That takes humility, that takes humility to be able to do that. To look at the log in my eye and not the speck in the other person's eye. Focus on one issue at a time. What is the issue? If the issue is me being late, then let's not talk about in a marriage context, you never take me out or we never make love enough. The issue is lateness. How did last Thanksgiving come up? The issue is one issue at a time. We call that in counseling the kitchen sink, where you're throwing everything at them. The spoon is the issue, but the fork is coming, the plate is coming, and knives, everything's coming. No, one issue at a time. Stay in the now is another piece here. Stay in the now. That connects with the one issue at a time. Let's stay in the now. Let's not get historical. Last Christmas, what happened?
Or 5 years ago.
5 years ago. Historical or hysterical. Okay? And then when possible, if we're able to hopefully resolve the conflict, understand, let's close in prayer. Lord, my wife and I, when we've had conflict, we call it intense moments of fellowship. We have opened up in prayer and said, God, we're not seeing eye to eye. We're not hearing each other. And then we've tried to close out in prayer. God, thank you for helping us to hear each other and close out short prayer. Not to be anything long. Begin in prayer, close in prayer.
And to make sure it's not an indicting prayer.
Exactly. Lord, get my husband, get my wife, and deal with them. No, that's not praying to God. That's sicking God on some people.
Johnny, you have outlined for us some proactive steps in resolving conflict. And I want to repeat for those who maybe missed one or more of these steps. And they are: initially give the person the benefit of the doubt, vent vertically, pray for the other person, attack the problem, not the person, choose your words carefully, own your own stuff, focus on one issue at a time, stay in the now, and when possible, close in prayer. Powerful, powerful tools for resolving conflict in a healthy way.
Thanks so much, Cheryl and Johnny. An insightful conversation on what we all experience at some point in our lives, conflict. You can learn more about Dr. Johnny Parker and how to order his books, Turn the Page, and Renovating Your Marriage Room by Room when you visit his website, johnnyparker.com. That's johnnyparker.com. Before we end today's broadcast, an excellent living moment featuring words of wisdom from best-selling author Elizabeth Elliot.
Is it too tough? Is it too outdated? Is it not applicable? Do you want to exclude this lesson in sanctification from your life? People say, yes, I do believe in God, but sometimes I can't figure him out. Now, may I see the hands of those of you who can always figure God out? God moves in mysterious ways his wonders to perform. He plants his footsteps in the sea and rides upon the storm. My husband and I live on the coast of Massachusetts. I've never seen any footprints in the sea. Blind unbelief is sure to err and scan his work in vain. God is his own interpreter, and he will make it plain. Of course we don't understand God. Of course we don't always know what he's doing, but we can be always sure that what he is doing is for our blessing and for our richness and for our sanctification and redemption. Can you honestly read the Bible and not believe the coincidences? Quotation marks around that word, because I don't believe there are any coincidences in God's economy. But there are so many wonderful stories in the Bible of what you and I, humanly speaking, would call coincidences, little things that happened in strange ways. Are these merely natural events, or is somebody in charge? Will you accept the will of God? Will you believe that even though this particular thing that worries you goes against the grain, you're not going to put your will against the will of God? You are going to accept his will. Satan schemes against us, and we get discouraged because we judge and measure the things that are happening in our lives by human measurements. God's are infinitely beyond common sense.
That was Elizabeth Elliot, best-selling author of Passion and Purity and Through Gates of Splendor. To learn more about her life and ministry, visit ElizabethElliot.org. That's ElizabethElliot.org. We'd love for you to like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram at Excellent Living. I'm Doris McMillan. Join us again next time for Excellent Living. That's doing life God's way.